Thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for joining with us here today. Many of the people will be introduced here shortly. I do want to thank the Speaker as well as the Attorney General for being here. I do want to note that the Lieutenant Governor wanted to be here. The Lieutenant Governor is in Harris County at a different law enforcement event, and that he either has or will be signing the pledge. At the same time, all of us will be signing the pledge and strongly supports what we will be talking about here shortly. First, however, I do want to make this point, and that is tomorrow we remember 9/11. We will never forget the evil of what happened in the United States of America on that day, but one thing that we will always remember is the way that Americans responded to that evil, especially the way that first responders and law enforcement officers in New York City ran toward danger, risking their lives to save the lives of others. That is what law enforcement officers do every day. They preserve calm amidst chaos. They step up and provide safety to our communities. So it is particularly offensive that some cities are disrespecting and even defunding our law enforcement agencies in communities across the state. Cities must prioritize public safety. The last thing they should do is to defund law enforcement. And yet, that is exactly what the city of Austin has done, and is what the Dallas County City Council voted to do in announcing its own defunding scheme last night. Other cities in Texas may be considering the same thing. We have seen the consequences of defunding and dismantling law enforcement in communities across the entire country. We've seen it in New York, in Chicago, in Portland, in Seattle, and other communities. And it is unacceptable to see the chaos that has been stoked in these communities by the local government's efforts to defund and dismantle law enforcement. It puts residents in danger and invites crimes into communities, and we cannot allow this to happen in Texas. To discourage cities from defunding law enforcement, we announced a legislative proposal last month that would defund cities that defund law enforcement agencies. Today, we are announcing an additional legislative proposal that will make it even more difficult for cities to defund law enforcement. The proposal goes like this. Cities that defund their police departments will forever lose their annexation powers. And any areas and any residents that have ever been annexed by that city in the past will have the power to vote to disannex them from the city. Combined together, all of these proposals will make it basically financially impossible to defund law enforcement, and it should leave Austin with no choice but to restore the cuts that they've already made to law enforcement. Now, part of our job as elected officials in Texas is to ensure the safety and security of all Texans. We will not allow that core function to be undermined by cities that defund and dismantle the law enforcement agencies that have a sworn duty to serve and to protect their communities. But we cannot do this alone. We need all Texans and all candidates for public office to join in this cause to keep Texas safe. That is why all of us here today, whether we are elected officials, whether it is law enforcement officers or their spouses, that's why we are signing the Texas Back the Blue Pledge. By signing this pledge, we are united in our efforts to stop cities from defunding their police. Our law enforcement officers have our backs every single day. We need to show them that Texans and their elected leaders have their backs too. Speaker Bonham.
Thank you, Governor Abbott. I want to thank the governor for leading on this issue. We were in Fort Worth a few weeks ago. He called me personally and said, can you come to Fort Worth? And we've got to do what we can to support the law enforcement in Texas and stop the insanity of cities turning their backs on safety and security in our communities. This pledge today is so vitally important beyond the reasons that people may initially look at. It's important because law enforcement in Texas and across America need to hear from citizens that we appreciate you. We support you. Sign this pledge so you can show that police officer, that law enforcement individual in your community, that you appreciate them putting their life on the line for you and for your family. There's spouses here today. There are very, very few professions in America where you go to work and you may not come home. This is one of them. And shame on any community that would not want to support that profession financially and otherwise. And I could not be more supportive of our law enforcement communities, Governor Abbott's efforts, and he mentioned the Lieutenant Governor who is with us at another law enforcement supporting event at the same time. It is vital that these men and women know we support them, we appreciate them, we thank them. As they protect us, we support them. And it is a pivotal time in our country that they know this defund garbage is simply garbage, and that the silent majority is with law enforcement. And this pledge is an opportunity for that silent majority to let law enforcement know you're with them. Governor, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. General Paxton.
So, Governor, I want to thank you. There's probably no more important role that you play and that we play in protecting the citizens of our state. And so I really appreciate you calling attention to this issue. I appreciate your initiative to stop the defunding of police. You know, it's a sad day in our city when law enforcement officers, police officers, have more fear of doing their job than the criminals have fear of doing their crimes. And we need to step up and change that. And I just want you to know, Governor and Mr. Speaker, that my office with our law enforcement officers are committed to doing that. So often we hear the negative stories about law enforcement, and there's no doubt that we have issues to deal with. But we don't hear the stories like I have to deal with when I have to walk into a hospital room and one of my law enforcement officers has been shot 9 times and is about to go into surgery, and the effect that that has on family members and coworkers. Those stories don't get told. And there are thousands of officers, hundreds of thousands of officers around this country and in this state that are literally risking their lives every day, and there's no stories told. We never hear about it. They get up every day. They don't get paid as much as they should, and they get up every day and they risk their lives. And for that, they're told that they're not good and they're not doing the right things. So I stand here with 2 of the great leaders of our state committed to supporting our law enforcement and stopping this ridiculous effort to defund our police.
Thank you very much. We are honored to be at the home of the Austin Police Association today, and we thank them for opening up this facility for us. And we have with us as our next speaker the president of the Austin Police Association, Ken Cassidy.
Thank you.
Would you pull that up right here?
I especially want to thank the 3 gentlemen in front today, Speaker Bonin, Attorney General Paxton, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate you, Governor. You know, I've been traveling the state over the last 5 years on operations down to Houston and down to Port Aransas when there have been major floods, and you've always been there, and your leadership is appreciated more than you know. The governor spoke earlier about 9/11. The one thing that I want to get across to our community and our elected officials is Police officers, firefighters, EMS are always there for the community. We're always are there when the bell rings. And now I want to ask the community and our local politicians, state politicians, national politicians to step up and sign this pledge. I think it is brilliant, and it shows your weak leadership and your weak personality if you do not sign this. And I challenge you to sign this pledge and support our law enforcement community all over the state of Texas and in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And now we have the president of the Women's Association and Patrol Sergeant for the Austin Police Department, Melanie Rodriguez.
Good afternoon. I've spent the last 23 years of my life dedicated to protecting the citizens of Austin. I've spent 15 of those years investigating sexual assaults, child abuse, and family violence cases. My third week on patrol after graduating from the police academy, my field training officer was shot right in front of me. The amount of murder victims, DWI victims, and assault victims are too numerous to count. This is not a job for the faint of heart, and the trauma that each officer takes home after years of these types of calls can never be healed. Today, I ask each Texan to stand with law enforcement and sign the Back the Blue pledge. We are the line that stands between safety and chaos, and we need your support. We are sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives. We're your neighbors, and we are not perfect. Each of us has a desire to serve and protect our communities, knowing that we may not come home at the end of the day. During the events of the last few months, our officers have continued to show up every day during the pandemic and during the rioting that began at the end of May. The vitriol and violence officers were met with every day and every night should disgust every citizen of Austin. Our local leaders sat in the comfort and safety of their homes, conducting Zoom meetings to reimagine public safety. Cadet classes were cut. This will impact your safety for years to come. The gang unit was cut in order to bolster patrol because we have no graduating officers to take those positions. The amount of guns and drugs taken off the street by the gang unit every year was staggering. As of January, this will no longer be a priority. This will directly affect the citizens of Austin. The DWI unit was cut in half, which unfortunately will lead to more deaths on our streets. When this comes to fruition, please remember who is directly responsible for this: your local leaders. This is not fear-mongering. This will be reality in Austin. I ask that in November, we reimagine the local leadership in Austin. In order to make change, you must vote and support candidates who would support law enforcement and safety in your city. So please back the blue and vote in November to keep Austin safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the president of the Texas Peace Officers Association, Michael Roan.
Thank you, Governor. As president of the Texas Peace Officers Association, I'm here to stand with you today and say, do not defund. However, I live in a community that has suffered from shootings and beatings of racist officers or suffered from violent crimes in red-line neighborhoods. I live in a community that sees excessive force used by bad police officers and police officers killing black people as a problem in the community. As a representative of TPOA, we're demanding police transparency and accountability, and to an end to police racism and brutality. As well, we seek to increase the number of officers to help change the culture and perception of the Austin Police Department. This can only be done with an investment in policing change, training and education systems, and increased hiring officers. Officers that contribute to the cultural change that the department needs to earn the respect of the community. As per TPOA members, we prioritize public safety, value human thriving, and desire police solutions. We support using the right amount of force, training racial and ethnic groups equally, and holding officers accountable for misconduct. For all officers are being punished for the actions of those who do not wear the badge with honor, and we should not. Defunding only supports and continues systems that are currently in place. Therefore, defunding is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the wife of an Austin Police Department officer, L.V. Johns.
Thank you, Governor, for inviting me to speak today. I'm here on behalf of the Texas Police Spouses Association. I'm the wife of a police officer who, like others, courageously serves his community. We the people have allowed the vocal minority to shape the world for the majority for far too long. The current cancel culture against our police officers with defunding of departments comes at a high cost to us all, a human cost. Our officers all across the state are being used as pawns in a destructive political game. There's no logic to the defunding decisions that has sent a wave across the nation. The mayor and council want you to believe that they have not defunded the police, but rather reallocated funds. However, this is just smoke and mirrors. It's designed to hide the truth. As a wife of a cop, I can tell you that Austin has begun transforming from a cool, weird, family-friendly city into the typical big city plagued with regular shootings, robberies, rapes, murders. But watching the news, you wouldn't know any of this, as the news only reports a fraction of the horrific violence taking place on our streets every day and every night. Defunding the police is defunding the community. Right now, officers across the entire state of Texas are leaving their jobs at an alarming rate. We are in serious trouble, Texas, and we need your help. I invite all people, Democrats, Republicans, independents, all races, genders, cultures, to join together and protect this state. It's time that we all use our voices to speak up as the majority. This is not the time to pick sides, but rather come together. It's time we put an end to this lawlessness and police hate. I ask and challenge you, the public, our politicians of the great state of Texas, to take the pledge. Let the voice be heard and make a difference. This is your chance to take a stand. The governor's listening. Take a stand, Texas. If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you.
Thank you. We will take some questions. However, first, we're going to sign the pledge.
Oh, yeah.
Police firing us, the pipe and core from all over the equipment to get this stubbing there. It's always to get the center. It's always new.
And there is a generation out there who is unaware of it.
I'm uninformed about it, but that's why we can.
We'll do some cleanup. All right, now we'll take a few questions.
Governor, how do you define defunding? Is that any funding taken away from a police department for any reason?
I define defunding as exactly what the city of Austin has done, exactly what Dallas City Council voted to do last night.
Do you feel like there's any compromise here, perhaps even in areas where even police officers might say there are other groups who might be better to respond to certain calls?
You know, you need to look at that very carefully, because an example of what I've heard is that maybe it's better for social workers to respond to domestic violence calls. Who can forget what happened a month ago in Cedar Park when police officers showed up to a domestic violence call and they themselves were shot? So you got to be very careful when you start reassigning law enforcement duties to non-law enforcement officers.
What are your plans with DPS in the city if the Austin Police Department decides, or if the Austin City Council decides to defund APD?
So that is an issue that we are still considering. It has some layers of complexity to it that we need to continue to look at it, but it remains an option on the table. Would you mind starting over, please?
Yeah, Fort Worth voters just voted to renew a sales tax that helps fund their police department, but, you know, in similar cities, if voters turned down a measure that would take away funding from the police, would that also fall under this definition of defunding police then?
Well, again, the goal first is to make sure that cities don't take votes or action to defund law enforcement. There are strategies to do that within their own budgeting process and or adding additional revenue to get it done. One thing that we have found consistently is citizens will support providing funding for law enforcement. Citizens are frustrated, however, with providing funding for issues they consider to be irresponsible. I'll give you an easy example, and that is, as we speak here today, trying to ask the city of Austin to provide more funding for their law enforcement. The city of Austin has devoted $500,000 to lobby the legislature so the legislature will not support the cause that we're supporting today. That's irresponsible. That is kind of spending is exactly what taxpayers are frustrated about.
So voters voted to take away funding without also counting the funding in the city?
I have yet ever to see voters vote to remove funding. So that's a hypothetical that has never existed.
Governor, what would be the threshold, though? Because with ambiguity, it's hard to define what.
Hey, well, you're exactly right. And so there are some ambiguities, and that's what a session is about. When we get all 150 House members, all 31 senators together, they're going to be able to go through all those nuanced details.
Well, two more questions.
For all the people watching, some may be families of victims from either being injured by police or killed by police. What do you say to them?
One thing that I strongly support, and that is better training for law enforcement officers, better hiring policies, better equipment for law enforcement officers. Are all law enforcement officers perfect? Absolutely not. We want to hire better officers. We want to train them better. Those things do require more funding, though.
Last question.
Local officials, even law enforcement groups, post SB2 arguing that it would take away funding for essential services like policing. Because what do you say to cities and local leaders who say they're already working less because of that and with the pandemic and the effect of the pandemic?
That is exactly what Mayor Adler lobbied the legislature for multiple years, saying that Senate Bill 2 was dangerous and risky because it would require him to reduce his police budget. Senate Bill 2 doesn't reduce your budget. It doesn't allow it to go up higher. But he found it risky and dangerous for years. But now he's defunding his police department at a tune exponentially greater than the lost additional revenues Senate Bill 2 would have ever had an impact on their city for. They're hypocrites, plain and simple. They are sitting around and using law enforcement as a political tool when it serves them best. When it serves them to hide from property tax reform and transparency to the voter, they use law enforcement. When it serves them to serve the socialist agenda that they want to play to, they use law enforcement. Don't buy it.
Last question.
What do you say to Mayor
Because-
One of the things that Austin has decided to do with their funding proposal is to take internal affairs and take control of it as opposed to leaving it under police. If a city decides to take that oversight role into their own hands, is that defunding?
That's an issue that the legislature can decide. Thank you all.
We gotta go.